This effect has never been shown before in Blender history, and you're going to be the first ones to learn it. I'm going to explain everything step by step, so let's get started straight away. So as I just said, this is going to be the toughest tutorial in the free course yet, and we're going to combine several different disciplines together in order to make a coherent render. So let's start straight away. I've got my strawberry right here, and this is the only thing that we're going to need for this render for now. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure that we can slice this strawberry in half, so we can actually use it to be sliced. Because now it is one big mess. And as you can already see, it is not possible to select a loop right over here and go all the way through the middle and have it be nice. And the same goes for if we just try to delete this. I mean, this doesn't look very appealing now, does it? So I'm undoing all of that. So I'm going to press on 3 on the numpad. But first, let's get this out of the way. So delete the cube, go to edit mode, A, select all. Go over to the knife tool, which is right over here, and set it to bisect. And right now, if we select everything and make a sharp line right over here, hold and drag, we can make a cut right in the middle. And that's what we've got right now. But now we actually want to select everything underneath this line. I'm going to select loops, select the loop inner region. And now we've got this selected. But there is a problem, a very big problem, as you can see. All of these are not selected. So we're going to press on 3, Alt-C to see through it, press on B, and make sure to select it all the way over here. And that basically solves most of our problems, but not entirely yet. So we have to do some manual work. We're gonna have to press on C, select some of this, and deselect all of this. And we're going to have to do that multiple times in order to get clean topology. And that is the annoying part of this. And I'm just going to do that right now. And beware, you also have to do this on the inside. Because as you can see, some parts over here are not selected. So we have to select those on the inside as well. So make sure that you do that and deselect this part on the inside as well. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I suggest you do the same, and I'll see you in a bit. So I've selected everything, as you can see, so now we can continue. I hope you've done the same. We can now click on P, separate the selection. Right over here, we now have 2 different parts of this strawberry. So we have the strawberry top, this is the bottom. I'm going to call it strawberry bottom. So we want to add the inside of the strawberry. So I'm going to press on 2, hold Alt, select this edge loop, press F, and now we've got this filled up. So all we have to do is give this a texture. So go over to the material, plus, new, assign, drag this upwards, go to the shader editor, right over here, Control-T, add an image texture. I'm going to include this image texture either on Patreon or on Gumroad for free, so you can get it. And let's go over to the viewport, UV, editor, view, unwrap, and now let's bring this over to this inner side of the strawberry, like this. Let's go over to the shader editor, drag this to the side, add a bump node, bump, color into the height, normal into the normal, and it's way too strong, so decrease the power of this. Let's also add this to the roughness, add a color ramp right over here, and we can play around with the values. I'm just going to do something like this. Then I will also add a hue, saturation, and value right over here, because I think it's a bit more orange, but it should actually be more red. So I'm going to change the hue, bring it to the left side just a little bit, make sure it's red. So now we have the inside of this strawberry as well. It's not going to be very noticeable, so we don't have to pay that much attention to it. Go to the bottom side of the strawberry, select it. Let's do the entire process once more. So select all of this, press F. Let's add a new material, new, assign, Control-T, drag it over here, bump in the height, normal in the normal. Let's drag this into the roughness, add a color ramp. Let's bring it to the side, just a little bit like this. Strength down on the bump until it looks like this. Hue, unwrap, add a hue, saturation, and value. Bring it right over there. Let's first go over to the UV editor. And now let's take a different strawberry. I'm going to set it right over here. And that looks pretty good. So go back to the shader editor. Let's decrease the hue to 0.46. Saturation up a little bit. And maybe in this case, 0.46 is not the best one. So there you have it. 2 sides, and now they also have an inside. So basically the next thing that we are going to do is to make some shape keys for this so we can animate the slice. So let's go over here. I'm going to select the top part of this, and I will go over to the Data Object Properties tab, go over to Vertex Groups, add a new group, go into Edit Mode, select all, and press Assign. Back into Object Mode, Shape Keys, let's add 2 of them. Then go back into Edit Mode, and now we need to think. Because we have to change something on the axis. Geometry nodes is way easier to work with if we work on the X or Y axis. If we do something diagonally, we're going to run into problems later on. I'm going to press on 3, and I want the slice to be happening on the Y axis. So I'm going to place my 3D cursor right over there. So I'm going to click on 1, select the dot right over here, Shift S, cursor to selected. Now turn on proportional editing. I'm going to set it to sphere, and I will press on 3, set the pivot point to 3D cursor, Alt-C so we can see through the mesh. Select a part of this, RX, and now we can actually slice it open like this. Let's see what it looks like. Whee! All right, very good. Now, all we have to do now is to make our slice animation and make sure that the shape keys align with it. Afterwards, we can add the particle system. We also need to make sure that it aligns with the animation. But first, let's make the knife. So I'm going to press Shift-A, Mesh, add a plane. I'm going to scale it down on the Y-axis to make sure it's more of a knife shape. SX, make it a little bit taller. I'm also going into edit mode, press E, Z, bring it downwards. Maybe we can add a loop cut right over here. Select this part, G and X, without proportional editing on, like this. Control 3, and add some loop cuts to make this a bit more sharp. SZ, make sure it's a bit thinner. And then we're going to give it a material, right over here, new material, increase the metallic, roughness down, change this color to a bit of a darker gray tone, but we can do some more with this. So let's drag this up, add in a noise texture, Control T, object into the vector, vector into the roughness, add a color ramp, increase the detail, apply the scale, Control A, apply the scale, roughness, bring the blacks a little bit closer to the whites and the other way around as well. So now this looks a bit more like a blade. It shouldn't be entirely reflective, so I'm going to turn the black upwards just a little bit. And I'm going to turn the white down a little bit as well, like this. And now that looks pretty cool. Now all we have to do is change the pivot point of this knife, because now it's rotating from the center. I want it to rotate from right over here. So I'm going into edit mode. I'm going to select this part right over here. Shift S, cursor to selected. And now click on object, set origin. And now when we rotate this, it is rotating from this point. Sorry, the battery of the camera died just now, but we are back again. So we've already changed the pivot point right here. So I'm going to select our knife, G and Y, bring it over to this side and make sure that we can now slice through our strawberry. It's a bit too low, so I'm going to bring it upwards so it makes a bit more sense. So let's make the animation for this. I actually want it to be happening fast first. So let's say from right over there. So let's change this to medium point and let's rotate this from right over there. Press I. So now we have a keyframe being located right over here. Then I will move to, let's say, frame 15 and move it right in the strawberry, like over here. Press I, and now we want this to be really slow. Think approximately 3 or 4 seconds might look good. 90. And then I'm going to press RZ, bring it all the way to the end, somewhere over here, I, and then all the way to frame 100. I want it to be going fast again. So let's see what it looks like. It's basically coming to a standstill right here. So I'm going to select all of this, T, linear. Let's make sure it's linear. All right, I think it could use some work, especially the last part. I think the last part is very slow. Let's bring it over here. Let's press on Control Tab, go over to the graph editor. We are moving on the Z rotation, so I'm going to close everything off except for the Z rotation. Let's see what it looks like. Naturally, it's all linear, so I'm going to press T, set it to Bezier. But then we had the problem where it's practically standing still here and then it's moving further. So we don't want that. This one should be linear. T, linear. All right, this looks a bit smoother. And then right over here, I'm not entirely sure what I think about this. I think it should be faster. So let's select both of this. Interpolation mode, Bezier. Let's take this handle and let's bring it upwards so it moves a bit faster. Yeah. Slow motion, slow motion, slow motion, flats. All right, so we got that done. So now we have to make the animation for the slice itself. Let's go over to the timeline, select our strawberry. Let's go over to the Object Properties tab, set this to 0. And on frame 15, that is when the knife hits. On frame 14, let's say. So let's place a keyframe right over here. So let's place a keyframe on frame 13, right before it hits. And then it's going through here in slow motion until frame 90. So this should probably be this part. Press I, and it's going a bit too fast. So we have to go into the graph editor because this is basically the animation for the slice. And the rest of this we are going to do in geometry nodes. We're actually going to have them like rotate like this and fly away. So let's go over here, the value key, A dot, let's see what it looks like. And it looks like this. And it's already opening up. Slicing, but you can actually see that it slices up too much already right over here. So let's make sure that we bring this down. That's a lot better. But now it's too slow over here. So we have to bring this up as well. Something like this. So, yeah, we got it. So that's actually the first part of this 3-step process where we are going to make this cool looking animation. Now the second process is going to be the geometry nodes part. Buckle up, we're about to learn some cool stuff. Cursor to world origin. Let's add in a plane. Then I'm going to bring this down, press N, remove that. Let's open this up. You can also go to the geometry nodes tab right over here, but I'm just going to do it like this. Open the geometry node editor, press N, and press new. So now we've got a new group input. We don't actually want to use it. We want to use our strawberry bottom and our strawberry top. Let's start with the top first, because that's the one where the particles are going to be spawning from. And we can set it to relative as well. And now it's basically shooting to the location where it was in the world space. And if we turn this off, you can actually see that the strawberry is still there. All right, cool. Set this to relative as well. So if you wanted to do this in the past, you would basically take the dynamic paint brush, use this as a canvas, then make sure that you have a nice vertex group going along, so you can render that out as a wet map, and the wet map can be used as a mask to spawn some particles on. Naturally, this is not the best method anymore. Since geometry nodes, we have the simulation zone. So we're going to use that in order to spawn our particles, and it will be a lot more versatile. We can change things in the process. But we do have to make a mask, so that's what we're going to do first. But that is the explanation of what is going to happen. We're going to make a mask, we're going to tell the simulation zone, only spawn particles on this mask, and we're going to animate this mask at the exact point of our knife. So in that way, the droplets will only occur when the knife is going through. So the first thing I am going to do, we want to separate our Y location on this strawberry. So let's add in a position node right over here. Let's add a separate XYZ, because I want to separate the vectors and only one output should be left. Then I'm going to add in a math node. Set it to greater than or less than. Maybe we can use less than. So let's use the Y. Let's use the viewer node as well and use this as the geometry node so that we can actually see what's happening. There it is. So this is basically the mask that is going to be animating. But the first problem that we run into is the fact that it's going all the way to the top. We don't want particles to be spawning from right over there. It should only be happening right over here. So we need another setup like this to cancel it out. I'm going to separate this once again. I'm going to place it above this one. And this time we want to use the Z. So I'm going to use the less than Z in this value. And this should be mixed together. So I'm going to use a compare node. So type in compare. Right over here, we're going to set it to greater than is probably fine. So let's plug this into the A, this in the B, and let's see in the viewer node what this looks like. It has now inverted it, and that's probably because we didn't change the threshold of this one. So, as you can see, we now have a way to animate this mask. And it's going from the right to the left, which is kind of annoying me actually. I'm going to set it to greater than. And now it should be going from the left to the right. Exactly where our knife is coming from. It really doesn't matter for me that this looks all jagged and stuff, because you're not going to notice when we add the particles. But basically, the name of the game is we need to animate this mask exactly when this hits. Let's drag this upwards, go over to the timeline, right before frame 13. So I'm going to take this, place it all the way over there, press I, and then the animation should occur all the way until frame, well, let's say 93 or 4. And now let's change this, make sure that we get our whites right over here. Press I, see what it looks like, select this node. It's going a bit too fast. So let's go over to the graph editor once again. And if you cannot see the keyframes, make sure you also have the geometry nodes right here selected and this specific node selected as well. And now if you open this up, you can see the default value, press A and dot, and there it is. So now we can change this and make sure that it's following along with the animation nicely. So something like this should probably work out. Now it's a bit too slow over here, so bring it upwards. So let's place an extra keyframe right over here, because then the blade is speeding up as well. So place a keyframe and make sure that it's going a bit faster. So something like this should probably do the trick. Could be a bit faster. So G and X, let's move it to the side. All right, that is entirely fine. So I'm going to place a keyframe on frame 90, right over here. Then go over to the last keyframe and let's bring this down. And now it should be removed afterwards. So flop, and it's gone. We're not going to notice the mask anyway. The mask is simply going to be used for the particles. So before we add the simulation zone, let's first explain what happened. So we said this is the vector of our object. So it has this vector, it's moving in directions. And then we told this object, all right, only give me the y-axis, which is this one. And then we animated this, making sure that the whites and the blacks are going entirely over this part. Then we made this one and we compared it to each other, which basically means if this value is 0.8, then don't show white anywhere above 0.8. And make sure that you only output whatever is our threshold. So that is basically what we changed here. Anyway, over to the simulation zone. This is the only node setup we need right here. It's very easy. So simulation zone, let's bring it in there. I'm going to have to explain this for a little while because I am not going to assume that any of you have played around with simulation zones before. So I have the group output over here. Let's plug the simulation zone in there. So let's add a set position node. You don't have to follow along with this. I'm just making an example. I'm going to add in a, let's say, join geometry. Let's bring it right over there. And let's bring in a cube as well. Cube in the join geometry. And let's set the set position to 0.2. Let's reset this. Let's go all the way to the beginning. And now there are cubes spawning on the join geometry. I think a better way to visualize this, by the way, is just to delete this, mesh in the geometry, geometry in the geometry. Now, as you can see, the cube will move upwards by 0.2 on the z-axis every single frame. Basically, it's just repeating whatever happens in the middle. So if I were to set this to 1, then you will see the cube will go a whole lot faster. And if I set this to -1, it is repeating the action on -1, so it's going down. That's basically the way the simulation zone works. Let's delete this as well, geometry in the geometry. And now we basically have to make some particles. So I'm going to make a distribute points on faces. I want to use a join geometry right over here because it should be added every single frame. It's not going to be added one time. Let me show you what I mean. Let's bring this right in the middle. What is going to happen? Nothing, there's no geometry. So let's just select our beautiful looking strawberry right over here. It's simply going to spawn distribute points on faces right over here, but there's nothing to repeat. So we have to take this out, join geometry right over here, and these points can go into the join geometry. But now all we have to do is change the geometry from the simulation to the distribute points on faces, and now watch what happens. Ah, it's actually spawning on every frame, but it's not moving outwards. It's not looking very particle-like. So now I'm going to use a store named attribute. Now a lot of people have trouble understanding what it does, but basically it's a container for information that you've acquired elsewhere. I've used this in GeoLights Pro, for example, my procedural lighting setup, where I make a connection between the shader editor and the geometry node itself. But besides that, we want to store the normal information and we want to offset its position because it's now being spawned on the same space each and every time. So first of all, let's add a set position node right over here because we want to change some things. If we were to increase the Z, what will happen? Well, this will happen. The particles will go upwards infinitely, which is not what we want. We actually want them to go outwards from the normals of our strawberry. In that way, it will move in every direction. So let's store the normal. Store named attribute, bring it right over here. Give it a name. I'm going to call it direct for direction. It's going to be normal. I'm actually just going to call it normal. And normal in the value, because the distribute points on faces automatically calculates the normals. So we can just store that value right over here. So we have now stored the normal information in the store named attribute, but we have to spawn it on the set position as well. Otherwise, it will go upwards infinitely. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a named attribute. But before we do that, I actually noticed that this is still on float, but it should be a vector because it's going in all directions. Vector, and for the rest, everything is fine. So let's set this to vector as well, and let's call it normal. Now, if we plug this attribute into the offset, watch what happens. And now it is shooting outwards like this from all parts of the strawberry. But there are two problems. First of all, it's shooting out way too quickly, going into each and every direction, and we want to have it a bit more contained. So the way to fix that is going to be a vector math node. Right over here, plug it in, and scale, select the bottom one. And now we set this to 0.1, for example. It's going to be way slower. But the next problem is that it's all pretty uniform. So if I press on 3, this is actually following the shape of the strawberry perfectly, which is not what we want. We want it to be more randomized. So we can do that. Let's go over here. Let's add a random value. And we don't want any particles to be sticking on the strawberry itself. It should all move outwards. So we definitely don't want to use 0. So let's use 0.01 and let's use 0.1. Then let's place this into the scale of the scale. Let's play it again. And now you can see that some of these lines are a bit shorter, some are a bit taller, and we've basically randomized this entire process. Now, of course, it is still shooting out from all sides, which is not what we want. So we're going to change that, which is why we created this initial setup in the first place. So go over here, and this one is our mask. We're going to use it as a selection in the distribute points on faces, right over here. Now let's see what it does. Flats. And it's shooting out in different directions. And this is now the point where I realize I made a mistake. The problem is there is this flat plane of the top strawberry, but we actually cannot use it like that. So let's bring the strawberry top back. Let's select it right over here. Let's go over into edit mode. Let's select this and let's select the bottom plane right over here. P, separate the selection, and now it's not part of the strawberry anymore, even though it's moving along perfectly fine. Let's go back to the geometry node setup and let's see what happens now. Yeah, so it's actually starting to shoot out from all these sides, which is exactly what we want. But as you can see, it's still a bit weird looking. They just shoot out like that. And of course we can crank up the density to like 100. It will already look a little bit better. This is kind of the way it's going to be. So all we have to do is make sure that this is not as straight as it is right now. And the way to fix it is actually by using a scene time. And then we're going to plug the frame into the seed of the distribute points on faces. And you will see what it will do. Bam. Bam. I love it when a plan comes together. Very cool looking. So now we actually want to make sure that we can animate the speed of this. So how can we do that? Well, the speed at which it occurs is basically this part right here. So all we have to do is add a math node, plug it right in between the random value and the scale node, multiply, and you will see that if I put this to 0.05, it's going to stay right over there. So if we want this to be slow motion, here it hits and it's being in slow motion. I'm going to set it to, let's say, 0.6, and then on frame 90 I will place a keyframe. Let's go over to frame 95 and let's increase this to like 3. So now we give the illusion, this is in slow motion, flats, and everything goes in real time. Maybe this one can be a bit faster. Let's see, it should probably be on frame 91. Let's redo it. Very slow, very slow. Bam, yeah. Now from here on out, there's actually a couple of different things that we can do. You could try to turn this into a volume and then return it back into a mesh and make a fluid out of it. I think that would look cool as well. I didn't actually try it out, just came up with it. But what we are going to do is use the instance on points, because we have to turn this over into a liquid. So instance on points. Now let's add a UV sphere right over here. Let's add it to the instance. Of course, it's way too big. So I'm going to add a random value, change this to 0.1 for example, value in the scale. And now it looks like this. But the thing that annoys me is that all of these balls, let's increase this, are the exact same shape. But we want it to be a bit more bubbly like so. So I'm going to add a set position node, set position, and let's offset this using a noise texture. So add a noise texture, factor math as well. Set this to subtract. And the reason for this, I'm just going to explain it one more time, is because usually everything goes from 0, 0, 0 to 1, 1, 1. But we actually want to shift that by 0.5, so it becomes minus 0.5, 0.5. So that's the way that works, just so you guys know. And now we have these distorted shapes. Set this to 4D because we are going to have to animate it to get this bubbly vibe, as you can see right here. Because as it moves through the air, the wind is acting on the liquid, making sure that it moves around like this. So we've got that taken care of. So I'm going to turn this back down all the way to like 1.2. I think this looks pretty cool. We have to shade this smooth though. So set, shade, smooth. Bring it right over here. So now it looks like this. It's way too big, of course. So I'm going to change the scale in the radius of the UV sphere. Maybe increase the random value and decrease the scale of this. Let's see what it looks like. All right, very cool, but one problem that we run into now is that all the rotations are the same. So we have to change that as well. So let's duplicate this random value. Let's turn it into a vector because rotations are vectors. Value into the rotation. And now let's just play around with this stuff until it looks a bit better. I really don't even look at this, just make sure it looks a bit cool. Very nice. So let's give this a material. So go over to the shader editor, right over here. And I actually want to see what I'm doing. So let's add a set material node. Set material node right over here, right behind the set shade smooth. So material 005 is what this one is called. And I will drag this upwards, we'll turn this up, roughness down, increase the transmission. Let's bring in a glass BSDF. Let's mix them together like so. And let's make this a little bit more of a soft reddish tone. And this one can be a harder reddish tone like this. Let's play this. All right. It kind of looks like the blood from 300, like blah. If you guys are using this for a movie and making blood like 300, send it to me. So let's play around with the IOR for this. And let's do it separately. So first do the glass. I think 1.33 should be fine. Let's bring it right over there. And let's set this to cycles as well to see what it actually looks like. Because we are still in Eevee. Set it to the render mode, like this, very cool. Let's delete this light. Let's add an HDRI. Oh, it's also very cool if you play it in reverse. So let's place our camera for now somewhere over here. I already want to see what the bokeh looks like. Go into the camera settings, depth of field. Let's select our strawberry and let's decrease the f-stop. And now we can get a better sense of what this will look like. I will go over here, go to the shader editor, and maybe play around with the colors a bit. Maybe this can be a bit darker. Ah, that looks a little bit more like the strawberry color though. Very nice. We're almost there, guys, but we're definitely not done because there's two more things left to do. First of all, as soon as the knife actually cuts through the strawberry, we want to make sure that the strawberry also moves like that. Then we also want to make sure that we have a cinematic environment and that all the camera motions look smooth. So those are the only tasks left for this tutorial, and then we will be done. The hard part is over. I am going to turn this off, the strawberry tops. And as you can see, we have no more strawberries. We actually don't want to use these ones because then we have to animate it separately from the geometry nodes editor, which is going to be a bit more troublesome. So I'm going to add a join geometry right over here. And then I will take this, let's take this geometry off our strawberry, bring it right over here. And now the top one will reappear. And let's do the same for the bottom one. So I've been thinking that in order to smoothen out the transition, we can add a droplet later on as well that moves towards the camera. So the camera can go into the droplet and transition into the last and final shot. So the way to animate this final part is actually by using a transform geometry. I know, very boring, but it's just the way it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is take our strawberry top that we created and bring it in here as well, because otherwise it's kind of hollow on the inside and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to connect this to the join geometry output as well and set this to relative, and now it should be filled up once again. Now we can animate this using the transform node. So let's go over here, add a transform geometry, and starting from frame 90, we want this to happen because that's the moment the blade speeds up. So I'm going to add a keyframe right over here on the translation, then go over to frame 130 and let's set this to the side. So let's use Y and maybe use the Z as well and bring it over there. So press I, and now we've got our keyframes for this as well. But as you can see, our plane remains at the same location. So I'm going to duplicate this transform geometry. Then I'm going to press I, then go back to frame 90 and set all of this to 0. Press I again, and now it should move along together. And now I'm going to add another transform geometry right over here. Go to frame 90, press I, go to frame 130, and this one should move to the other side. We're going to do the rotation later and press I. So let's start with the top one. We're going into the graph editor, Control Tab, and now we're here. Close the X and the Z, go to the Y, press A, dot, and now we can only see this part. I'm going to select this handle. I'm going to bring it upwards because I want this to move quickly, so it should be moving towards the side very quickly. Now we cannot see this happening as of yet. As a matter of reference, we can see our original plane and it has become a little bit faster, but it's not entirely what I want. So I'm going to turn it up, then take this handle, G and X, and bring it over here. So now it should be very fast. As you can see, it has some weird Z-axis motion, so we have to go into the Z value as well. So lock this, go over to the Z, select it, a dot, and do the exact same thing. Now the trick is to select both of these, and then I want to lock all of these off, except for the Z value first, and I want it to look the exact same as this one. So I'm going to take this, bring it upwards, bring it down, then take this, G and Z, and now let's do the same for the Y value, and now it should be following the other one well enough. Now let's select the bottom one, let's go over to the Y value, let's lock everything else off, select it, and this one we should bring down. Take this one, bring it to the side, very cool. Also do this for the Z value, take this, bring it down, G and X. But this still looks pretty janky, so I came up with an idea to transition into a droplet, which is what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to add a droplet. Let's go over to this frame. Let's place our 3D cursor right over there. Shift A, mesh, and let's add a UV sphere. We're going to give it the same material as the other one. So go over to the material tab, material number 5, and now it should be the glass material, shaded smooth. I'm also going to add a displace. So displace right over here. And maybe we also want to add a subdivision surface modifier. So Ctrl 2 and place it above the displace. Now click on new, go over to this tab by clicking over here. It will automatically bring us to the texture tab. Set this to clouds and increase the size so it's not as prevalent anymore. Go back to the modifier panel and decrease the strength just a little bit and set this to global. So now as it moves through space, it will have a wobbly motion, just like a droplet would have. So do I want my camera to be located over here? Do I want my camera to be 50 millimeters? Maybe I want it to be a bit more zoomed in, like so. So I think for this frame, we actually want to move it backwards. I've got it on 80 millimeters, and this is the final place where the camera will be located. Let's bring our droplet right over here, G and X, and let's place a keyframe where this is supposed to happen. So around frame 110, I'm going to place it in the camera frame. Press I. I'm going back to frame 90, G and X, move it backwards till it is in the strawberry, and then I'm going to scale it down as well, bring it somewhere over here, press I. We shouldn't be able to see this. All right, very good. But then it is coming towards us and we can transition into the droplet. And this also takes a bit away from the jankiness of the animation itself. Speaking of which, let's select it and now also give it some rotation. So I'm going to do the bottom one first. On frame 90, it should be exactly this. Same goes for this one, and the same goes for that one. And then on frame 130, we can rotate it on the Z axis, something like so maybe. Maybe a bit on the Y, like this, and press I. I'm going to do the same for the other ones. So that's it for the animation. Now all we have to do is set up a cinematic background and animate our camera as well. I'm going to select this camera, I'm going to duplicate it, turn it off, go back to the original camera, just in case we mess something up. So let's place our 3D cursor right over here. Let's add a curve circle. I'm going to scale this up, and now I want to connect my camera to the curve circle. So select the camera, go over to constraints, constraints follow path, and constraints track to. Now the follow path should be the circle, and it will offset our camera all the way over here. Now the reason for it is because it has data stored in a location. So we have to set this to 0, and now it will be placed somewhere on our circle. And if we play around with this, we can actually move the camera on this circle, as you can see, like this. But we also want to have a focus point, otherwise the camera will look at nothing. So let's increase the scale of our circle, bring it down halfway to the strawberry, click on the camera. We actually want the slice to happen somewhere over here. So the camera should probably already be here at this point. So I'm going to press I right over here. And now we can play around with some of these settings. So I'm going to select the curve, press I as well. So first I'm going to add an empty because we want the camera to be tracked to that empty. So I'm going to press the 3D cursor right over here, Shift A, add an empty, plane axis, scale it upwards. Now I'm going to select the camera, select the picker tool, and now select the empty. And as you can see, the camera will be pointed at this empty, and then it's zooming out. We've got a droplet coming in. Slicing through, I kind of like this angle. Slicing through. Maybe it should be a bit further away, something like this, so we can actually see the blade. Let's take the Bezier circle, zoom it out just a bit, press I, and then it will zoom out for the final shot. And this one shouldn't be as scaled outwards. We want it to scale in just a little bit. Press I, go over to frame 110, and then scale it outwards just until this droplet fits right into it. So press I. So now we have to do the beginning. So go all the way to frame 1. And maybe I just want to rotate this on the Z-axis or on the Y-axis as well. And then take the empty, move it upwards. Take this, scale it outwards. So press I on this one, then press I on the Bezier circle. Go to the camera and maybe change the offset just a little bit over there. Now right over here, the empty should move down so we can actually see the blade. And I think at frame 30, we want it to be somewhere over here. So press I. And at this point, I want the empty to move to this side. So we have the strawberry in the middle. I do find that this animation right here of the zooming out is way too slow. So we should probably speed that up. Let's go over into the graph editor. Let's close everything off except for the scale. Let's select this, press A and dot. Then I will take these handles, set it to free. And now we can make sure that this goes upwards a bit quicker and this goes to the side a bit quicker. And now the scale is a bit faster. So let's see what it looks like. Whew. This means we also have to change the rotation, in this case the Y rotation. So let's unlock this. Let's take this, set the handle type to free, handle type to free. Let's take this, bring it upwards, take this, bring it to the side. And I feel like it's kind of standing still right now, and it has to do with the scale. So I'm going back into the scale. Let's see what's happening. We actually want this to be a continuous motion. So I'm going to bring this down a bit. G and Z bring this down as well. Now all we have to do is give this a background. So let's go add a background, Shift A, image, images as planes. I'm going to add a blue sky. You can add whatever you like. I think this will look pretty cool. So I'm going to scale it up, bring it back, rotate it on the Y. Scale it upwards and make sure that it is in the frame the entire time, which is the case. But what we can also do is maybe add some more strawberries in the background. So Control V, let's add our strawberry back in. Bring one right over there. Let's rotate it. Let's bring it over there. And perhaps we want to rotate this the entire time. So press I, then go over here to the final frame, which is 110. R, Y, Y, R, X, X. Rotate it like this. I, and make it linear. So select all of this, T, linear. All right, pretty cool. And maybe we can add another one of those right over here. Delete the keyframes, go to frame 1, press I, frame 110, R, Y, Y, R, C, Z, R, X, X, and make sure it has a bit of a rotation. Select both of these, T, linear. And I think a way to make this even better is to add in a light area lamp, scale it upwards, bring it to the side like this, rotate it ever so slightly, increase the power. And now that looks a bit more cinematic using those highlights. Right now it's 2 o'clock in the night and I want to go home. So I might change some of these things tomorrow to make a little bit of a better render, but I've given you all the ingredients you need in order to get this render done. So I recommend playing around with these settings, maybe use some different fruits or different background colors, stuff like that. I've given you everything that you need in order to get this render done. Subscribe and I'll see you in this video next.